All right, so one of the most contested reviews on my channel, the one that seemed to cause almost the most confusion in terms of how my audience interpreted my opinion on the book, is The Burning White, the final book in the Lightbringer series, because I'm extremely positive on Lightbringer as a whole, but it seems in my Burning White review, upon especially going back and rewatching it, that I'm fairly negative and almost confused, and so an audience coming into that could certainly sit there and go, does he now hate it? What's going on? Why is The Burning White causing all these problems? And that honestly stems from a fairly simple place where I was trying to very much so be entirely spoiler-free because I was reviewing the book on launch day because it was sent to me early, and I did not want to risk spoiling anything. There was literally no point in having a spoiler section of the video because no one had read it yet, and so I was holding back a lot, and I also was still learning how to review books as I am now. I'm always trying to do better than I once was, and I did a bad job of switching between the two hats I need to wear in a review. My critical hat and my personal subjective opinion hat. One where I break down how well is it objectively achieving the things that you can measure objectively versus how am I reacting with my personal taste. And I feel like The Burning White, the final entry in Lightbringer, really knocked it out of the park in one sense, and then when it came to my subjective opinions, I was much more conflicted. But I want to get on the record here in this video my full spoiler-free and then spoiler-filled thoughts on The Burning White and the Lightbringer as a whole, kind of trying to predict what its legacy will be as it's now beginning to enter that stage of the series is finished, we can process it as fans, and figure out what really worked and what didn't. So going ahead straight into this, we'll start with the spoiler-free stuff, because I know some people are still working their way through the series, or particularly this book, and I want to just get on the record still right now. I think Lightbringer is completely brilliant. I think it's so well written, coming from a very original place, and up until the last book, I was just kind of increasingly more and more positive on it. I know some people more whiffle waffle in terms of they say which is the best book, but I kind of just thought each entry, especially in the character work and dynamics and choices from the author, were better than the last, until we got to The Burning White. And that's the one where I have a lot more conflicts. But I do want to say on the record right now, it's still in my top 10 fantasy series of all time. It really is. And no, that has nothing to do with the fact that I've interviewed Brent, I've talked with him. He knows, I've told him to his face, I'll be honest to any review. In fact, in the interview that I have with him on my channel, we talk about having to do negative reviews for people you know. And yeah, I've talked with Brent twice now, once at JordanCon, once in the interview. Seems like a really nice guy, probably the most funny interview I've ever had, but that's not going to affect how I review his books, because I will never risk destroying my reputation here in the medium in which I make my life over possibly angering an author, though I don't think I would make Brent angry. He's an adult and can definitely take criticism. I mean, he's promoted my videos before, and he's clearly been through my channel, and I've negatively reviewed the Night Angel trilogy. I thought it was fair, not great, so he clearly has no problem with that. I just want to get that out of the way, because I hate when people say, like, oh, the reason Daniel seems conflicted because he's not honest. That's not the case, man. But, so, spoiler-free, let's focus now on The Burning White. These are some of the older reviews on my channel, so not all of them are up to par, not all of them are great, but The Burning White as a whole, I do feel, spoiler-free review-wise, is still accomplishing what Brent Weeks wanted to do. So I actually give it a lot of accommodation there. I think he, as an author, was very much so trying to directly answer hefty moral and religious questions in his text. And that's not an easy ticket to take up. A lot of authors skirt away from answering these bigger moral questions and instead will ask them throughout their text and then just have a big epic climax where nothing is totally directly answered. Whereas in The Burning White, without getting into spoilers, things are answered in a very authoritative way, extraordinarily so, and that's going to cause derision. From an objective reviewer standpoint, I really respect that decision. It's an intense one I don't often see, but the way he went about it, the result was I personally, as a reader, kind of had it take the story down a couple notches at the end there. I don't love the actual ending to this series. That doesn't affect the fact that some of the characters are some of the best modern fantasy characters of all time. The constant back and forth with
Andros Guile
of is he really working for the good? Is he bad? Is just stellar. I through and through just love Brent's character work especially. Gavin is just one of the best slow unravelings of mystery early on in the series that's addictive to get through. And God, Lightbringer is a good example of building religion within a story. Oh man, the whole storyline with religion and is this justified, holy authority being questioned and proven wrong and right and wrong. I love that theme so much. And I've reread Lightbringer a good bit as I've gone through and just wanted to prepare for more Lightbringer videos in the future. And even having the series be completed now, it holds up at the beginning. I mean, this is just a solidly executed story and built up. And I don't even say critically that the ending is bad. It's just one where I stand by what I said in my review. It's going to cause derision because of the way it wraps up. Unfortunately, because of how drastic and polarizing a lot of these decisions are in terms of the medium of reading and writing a fantasy book, I can't get into them too hefty without spoilers. I just say that it didn't leave the best taste in my mouth with not only some of these direct answerings from the author, but the way a couple characters are wrapped up. The overall effect of a couple characters existing in the text. I just feel like some of them, their whole story at the end didn't have a lot of weight on the overall plot. Like the plot ended and their arc didn't really affect anything. Like if you lifted this character out, nothing changes much. It's just kind of, oh, what was the point of this for the grand whole story? Again, there's some people who I think won't mind this as much, especially if you're coming from the position of I'm here for the characters and don't really care about everything tying into the story. You're more okay with a character just more fading out with its evolution and not being directly involved. That's definitely a very valid place to come from. I think I actually used to be more one of those readers where now I tend to weigh books on more of the complete package delivery, which you may have kind of noticed if you've been watching my book reviews for a long time, where I used to just have a very harsh bias towards character and relationships. I'm now kind of more slipping into this, how is it all tying together? What's the complete package, the complete artwork look like once I step back? Aside from that though, the ending of The Burning White still had solid character moments, some really great action. Brent's works with action scenes is in the absolute top tier of modern fantasy authors, especially with his incorporation of his very flexible magic system. You can just safely assume that for the rest of Brent's career, we're just going to continue to get absolute top-notch action from the guy from beginning to end. But now I will go ahead and transition into the spoiler-filled section of this video. If you do not want to see spoilers for The Burning White, I'm going all the way to the end here. Click off this video because there is going to be direct end of series, here's how things wrap up discussion, and of course I've been in trouble with having spoilers in the channel before, so I'm making it as clear as possible. Get out, bye-bye. So with what I've been saying, how certain things are going to be wrapped up in ways that I think some fans will love and others will hate, it's kind of like across the board for Lightbringer. Like almost every kind of aspect of this story's conclusion, literally like checkmark each individual element, could fall into that. Usually there's some things within series where you're like, oh, that was just objectively ended well, and I'm going to be happy with this series conclusion, and it's safe to say that everyone I know will be. But it's in this controversial mishmash, and I think that comes down to how Brent writes as an author. He is an author who I've said from the beginning makes bold choices, and that's been something that's heavily prevalent throughout this series specifically. It is one where you are constantly just surprised at cultural elements being brought in, character choices being made. I mean, it's kind of like, in my opinion, like the biggest takeaway from Lightbringer is just how much it's different than its peers. I mean, it's even on core concept of flintlock fantasy, which is a alternative subgenre of fantasy that's not the mainstay. And then you have main characters who are deeply egotistical, like Gavin Guile, flawed to their core, total jackasses in a lot of ways. And that's not something a lot of fantasy authors are going to do. They're not going to have their main protagonist for a large chunk of the beginning of the series just be a slave-owning, not caring jackass. Like, that's who he is. And then it goes into some really twisted family dynamics we're all aware of at this point, and there's this hyper close-up lens on the psychological ramifications of what these characters are going through, and that has just been such an enjoyable part of the series, and I think why it's going to continue to rank so high for me, because I, at no point during Lightbringer, felt super safe with every character. Everyone felt touchable, including Kip, and there was never a predictable path for a character to go down. Little did I know a few of the ends of these paths these characters were going down were going to be kind of just fizzling out. Liv, specifically, is what I'm referring to here. I'm having a really hard time justifying the amount of page time spent on her, the amount of effort put into her character development, and all this foreshadowing. It felt like things really building for her to have this major impact on the story when not much. Liv, I just feel like I could lift out and rearrange a couple of things, and her character would not have mattered. And I don't know if that comes down to not entirely planning the series out at the beginning and not sure where it's going to end up, or it more falls into, oh, that was the plan from to begin with, and that was mission accomplished, and it's just not falling in with my taste. I think it's going to be the former, if I had to take a guess, but obviously I don't know for sure. I also was very unsatisfied with the decisions kind of made for the end of Andros's arc. I very much so felt it was not earned to have him end as this kind of good guy image. So much of what he did was heftily sacrilegious, just awful. And when you have this, oh my God, God is coming down and giving us these answers. God appears in this book. God is telling us what is right and wrong here, which is what I'm talking about. That's bold. It seems strange to have this character who so manipulated religion, who so goes against the ending themes that we are being delivered, somehow doesn't have these super high consequences. He just kind of has this like okay ending. Not great, but like, why is this the decision here? Because it's very unsatisfactory for me on the personal side of things. Again, from the critical other hat, I think it's still good, but like for me as a satisfied subjective reader, I'm left wanting. And then we have a very just easy to see coming delivery of Kip's death and revival. Did not like that at all. Before he even died, I could tell he was going to come back, and it just became this no stakes, not very emotionally heavy. I didn't love that. I feel like Kip should have either just lived or he should have died and been done. Honestly, from like where I was coming from as a reader, I thought the end of the series would be Kip living and Gavin dying. Gavin being the one who sacrificed himself and not being brought back. I thought that would have been much more fitting for all the directions everything was going in, but then you could make the case it's too predictable. I don't know. I just was left with not a bad taste in my mouth from Lightbringer. As I've said, it's still one of my favorite series because I feel like it's so solidly written, like from every technical angle. This series just knocks it out of the park. I don't know. I'm not left as a reader completely filled with catharsis here. It's more of this was such an epic journey, and now we're just kind of easing into the ending, and it's not the thrill ride it once was. It starts as a roller coaster, but for some reason the last leg of the roller coaster is this slow descent down. But I'm sorry for so not clearly communicating my thoughts early on with Lightbringer. That was something I should have definitely done better. And the fact that the book had just been released and I was really hesitant to talk about spoilers is not a good excuse. I should have sat down to better prepare and communicate my thoughts. But also, I made the note in the video, and I stand by, this is going to be a book that I have my opinions changing on. And they're already kind of more, I don't know if this is going to make sense, more mixed than they were already, especially with the whole having God come down and solve the problems. I respect it for being a holy shit, didn't see that coming moment, but I don't like it because once you introduce God into your text and God is telling your characters, you'll be fine, I'm going to solve all the problems, which essentially happens, that's going to murder the stakes of the whole story, like, completely. And I feel like it did for that sequence of scenes that happens just afterward, which is kind of even more taxing because I really liked the Orholum weave in with this character, is he not, up until that point, but once you get what I'm saying. I over-explain. I don't know, but these are my final Lightbringer thoughts. It's still one of my top 10 fantasy series. I will point to it as a beacon of conflict between characters, of development of character, especially with Kip. It's one that will be divisive, and I think we're seeing that already. The fantasy subreddit, if you look up Lightbringer on it, has people defending it and just railing against it. I think they're going too far sometimes. It doesn't completely destroy a character's arc to not have the very ending pay off with them. I'm the kind of reader who very much so can enjoy the ride and then just be okay with the ending not being totally solid, but that's where I'm sitting right now. I think it was a phenomenal ride with action and team building and character development. The black card is still just so sexy in terms of its execution. Those are my final Lightbringer thoughts. And I really want to know, now that we have some distance, enough of you have probably finished Lightbringer to be able to give your thoughts, please leave your comments down below and let me know what you think of this one as a whole. Also, definitely leave a spoiler tag for your comments. I actually saw someone on Reddit saying they had Lightbringer's biggest twist spoiled from my video once, and that like broke my heart. Please make sure that doesn't happen and spoiler tag your comments. I may be deleting ones that aren't, and that's not like a malicious FU. I just really think this is a story that's better going into it not having anything spoiled. Lightbringer is a series I recommend going in borderline blind to. Anyway, guys, like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace.